Part 143. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1421. But the color of this medicine is as strange as the color that gave him the antidote last time. The last potion was blue, but this one was green. They didn't have such a potion here, so they were suspicious when they took it. It's okay to do it once, and once again, it is difficult to guarantee that the prince will not be suspicious. Don't think about secretly putting it in the water for the prince to drink, because everyone around the prince has to check everything imported. Even if it is to boil the medicine, then two people must keep an eye on it at the same time. From the time it is delivered to the prince receiving it, it cannot be separated from everyone's sight. So, Man Bao poked at the mall and decided to wait a little longer. If the prince really can't stand it, she will feed him more, and then let Bai Shan come up with an excuse for her. But Man Bao rarely saw any substantial progress from the prince, and several times he went out of the palace to meet people quietly. But it was only to win over. The topic of raising troops has not been brought up yet. Man Bao feels that it is still safe at present, mainly because she and Bai Shan have inquired about that person named Gan Bin. It is said that he will not return to Beijing for rotation until March. Of course, this was inquired with Yin Or, and he did not dare to let Yin Li know. Because they also don't know if Yin Li knows that Gan Bin is the prince's person. What if he knows, and then the two of them are self-defeating? After another 10 days, Man Bao went to the palace to pierce the pulse of the prince, and quietly asked the princess date, and asked, "If I remember correctly, your date last month is also accurate." Bar. The crown princess was stunned for a moment, then nodded with a blushing face, looking at Man Bao expectantly, "Yes." Man Bao nodded at her and affirmed, "I calculated, from today to the day after tomorrow is your ovulation period. These 3 days are the best time to conceive. Just as you stop the medicine, cough, tonight you and the prince can give it a try." The princess blushed and looked at the prince lying on the couch. Prince. Although the voices of the two of them were lowered, how could he be able to do well and have good ears? Man Bao also turned his head and glanced at the prince. She didn't know what to think. She said, "Tonight, the prince's medicine doesn't need to be drunk. I can give him some medicinal food to eat." The crown princess wondered, what kind of medicated diet? Can medicated diet also treat it? Man Bao whispered, "No, are there deer whips, bull whips, or something in the East Palace?" The princess blushed even more. Man Bao knew at a glance that it was there, so she rubbed ink and wrote a medicated meal for her, and whispered, "It is said that it is very useful." "Crown Princess, who did you tell me?" Man Bao tilted his head and thought for a while, then said, "Treasurer Zheng and Dr. Ding both said that the effect is good." Thinking of the green jade hairpin that the crown princess had given them privately, Man Bao hesitated for a moment, but he still reached into his sleeve and took it out. In fact, he took a small notebook out of the space. She stuffed it into the crown princess and said in a low voice, "It's a good thing for pregnancy aid, you can watch it with the crown prince at night." The princess opened it curiously and glanced at it, and almost threw the book away. She looked at Man Bao in shock. Man Bao is no longer a child who didn't know anything back then, especially since she is now married to Bai Shan, and her face is a little red, but she feels that life is more important. To say who is looking forward to the prince having children the most now, other than the prince and his wife, she thinks it must be her and Bai Shan. So this bit of shame can be thrown away, and she is still a doctor, and as a doctor, of course, she is anxious for the urgently ill. Man Bao leaned on the princess' ear and taught her in a low voice. The whole face of the crown princess was about to burn. She leaned against Man Bao. After listening carefully, she turned her head and looked at her seriously. Seeing her blushing, she couldn't help being angry and laughing. In the end, she was more happy. She nodded Man Bao's forehead and asked, "I don't know who you learned from, but you learned so much." Man Bao whispered, This is all about my eldest sister's marriage more than 3 years ago, and I deliberately studied it. Of course, it was teacher Mo who led her to study together. She whispered, "My eldest sister became pregnant soon after she got married, and my nephew can walk now." The crown princess was faintly envious, and subconsciously squeezed the pamphlet given by Man Bao. After Man Bao pulled the needle out of the prince's body, she hesitated for a while, and said on behalf of the prince and the prince, "Your Highness, you and the prince can try to have sex tonight. These 2 or 3 days are good days, so you don't need to eat at night. Now that the medicine is over, you can eat medicated food." Man Bao also asked very considerately, "Do you want me to come to the palace tomorrow to see?" "No need," the prince said with a blank expression, "you can come back to the palace in 5 days. It doesn't take so long, does it?" However, looking at the prince's eyes, Man Bao still shrank his neck and slid down obediently. When she slipped away with the medicine box, the crown princess couldn't help laughing, and said with a smile, "This child doesn't know where to get so many ideas." The prince snorted and said nothing. It had been a long time since the crown prince had recruited someone to serve the bed. At night, he took out the booklet Man Bao left from the crown princess, and after looking at it, he took the crown princess to read it together. When Man Bao entered the palace after 5 days, she didn't know whether the crown princess was pregnant, but it seemed that the couple seemed to be in a good mood. Man Bao gave the prince an injection as usual, and prescribed medicine for him as usual. Don't say that he still doesn't know if he is pregnant. Even if he is pregnant, he must continue the treatment to make a good foundation. The prince took off his shirt and lay down on the couch before Man Bao took out the needle bag. He turned around and saw the injury on his back. He couldn't help but let out a yaw and asked, "His Royal Highness, why are you injured?" The princess beside her blushed and simply got up and went out. Man Bao didn't pay attention, but the prince looked up at her. Seeing her frowning and looking like she didn't understand, he couldn't help but ask with a smile, "Why, you don't know?" Man Bao was stunned and asked in surprise, "Why would I know? This injury has something to do with me." The prince wanted to make fun of her, but the concubine had already brought a cup of tea and delivered it directly to the prince, implicitly warning, "Your Highness, are you thirsty? Would you like a cup of tea? I only fell in love last night, the prince is not good, so I will lose her face today, reach out to take the tea and drink it up, put down the cup and lie down and say, 'Come on.'" Man Bao looked at the wound on his back and didn't speak for a while, and finally changed him a set of needles to avoid those wounds. She felt that the injury was very similar to a cat scratching, but it was definitely impossible for a cat. Who would be so stupid to let a cat scratch so big? Man Bao frowned, and after piercing the needle, he searched the medicine box, found a bottle of ointment and handed it to the crown princess, saying, "This is for wiping the crown prince's wound, so it will get better soon. Madam, you let's persuade the prince, he's better off, but he can't fight." The prince was about to fall asleep, but when he heard the words, he woke up with joy. When he laughed, the needle on his back was about to move. Today is Tomb Sweeping Day, remembering the medical workers who died in this epidemic. See you at 12 noon. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1422. The princess blushed like something, but Man Bao was not a fool. He turned his head and glanced at the prince who couldn't stop laughing, and Man Bao guessed that the injury was caused by the princess. "I didn't expect that the princess looked so gentle and could actually hurt the prince. She deserves to be a role model for my generation." Man Bao no longer mentioned this matter, but said to the prince who had moved the needle with a smile, "His Royal Highness, if you laugh again, I will tie it again." The prince barely held back his laughter. Since being allowed to have sex for the first time, although the prince is no longer abstinent, he has not indulged in sex, and basically rests with the princess. There are no real secrets in the palace, especially when the East Palace is stared at by so many people. In a few days, the story of the prince calling for water at night slowly spread to the East Palace, and the first to know was the emperor and the queen. The two did not ask the prince, nor summoned Zhou Man, but hoped in their hearts, and their appetites improved every day. He was very nervous, and kept staring at the East Palace quietly. Not to mention the emperor, the queen couldn't help worshipping the Buddha in private, and the emperor donated a lot of sesame oil directly to the Hyogyo temple, hoping that the Buddha and his old man would bless the prince. Manbao was being led out of the palace by eunuch Wu when he found out about it. Maybe it was because the atmosphere in the East Palace was good recently, and he saw a little more smile on his face. He shouldn't have sent her off today, but he just happened to be going to the East Palace on an errand, so he dropped by the way to send the treasure, and talk by the way. He deliberately mentioned the reaction of the emperor and the empress in order to tell Zhou Man that the emperor and empress took this matter very seriously. But Manbao is concerned, why does your majesty always only worship Buddha? You should worship all of them. If this is not good here, it will be good there. Eunuch Wu whispered, if you are so dishonest, don't you neglect the Buddha? The Buddha knows and will blame him. Manbao thought for a while and said, isn't it? I like stewed chicken, but I also like to eat stewed mutton. As long as it's delicious, why should I choose the same? She said, Buddha and Dao, even Fa and Confucianism, and other schools of thought are the same. Use what you say is right. How can there be one that believes in the same thing? Is it good to use it? Eunuch Wu said he did not understand. Manbao also took advantage of the situation and made a complaint, because she felt that the emperor had brought a trend, and the Hyogyo temple was very lively. But Hyogyo temple is a little far from where they live. There was an accident when they went there last time, which shows that it is not auspicious, but the Taoist temple in the capital is not as lively as the Buddhist temple, and Pianmanbao likes to be lively. She felt that the emperor should be treated equally. Since she went to Hyogyo temple to donate sesame oil money, she should stop by and do a ritual in the Taoist temple. The two went to the gate of the palace chatting gossip. The carriage that usually sent Manbao was there, but the driver was not there. Manbao glanced at the group of people in Wulala behind Eunuch Wu, and waved generously, Eunuch Wu, you can go first, I'll wait here. Eunuch Wu frowned slightly, where did this person go? Manbao didn't care, people have 3 urgent needs, maybe it's convenient. Wu Gonggong waited for a while, but he still didn't come when he saw someone, but he was still leading an errand, so he smiled and said, that little Dr. Zhou wait for a while, and let this palace person stay with you to relieve your boredom. No, no, leave people to me, what if you don't have enough staff? I'm not bored, I can talk to the guards. The elder guards guarding the palace gate. Manbao was accustomed to going in and out of the palace, and Eunuch Wu was not worried. Seeing her insistence, he smiled and led people away. After Manbao waited for a while for him to leave, the driver came. He repeatedly pleaded guilty, bent over and let Manbao get into the car, and after passing the inspection, he drove out of the palace. Manbao felt that his face was a little pale. Most of the time she was in and out of the palace. So she raised the curtain and asked him, I see you sweating on your forehead, your face is pale, and your lips are colorless, what's wrong? The driver hurriedly said that it was okay. But when she glanced at the medicine box by her hand, she hesitated. After hesitating for a while, he still whispered, Dr. Zhou, what if the diarrhea doesn't stop? I have a fellow living with me, he seems to have contracted the epidemic for the past 2 days and has been diarrhea. Manbao stared at him, and when he saw that he was sweating profusely, he affirmed what he was thinking. She used to take the palace servants to teach Lu Yunu and the others in the palace, and only then did she know that there are many taboos in the palace, one of which is that the people who are serving cannot get sick, especially epidemic diseases. Once you have similar symptoms, you should move to the quarantine center first, whether it is or not. At this time, The amount of medicine is limited, and the palace is full of noble people, but they can't take the risk. Man Bao frowned. If there is an epidemic, he may harm others by staying in the palace like this. But the powerful palace servants who move to the epidemic prevention center may die, not to mention the palace servants at the bottom. Basically, going there is a dead end. Man Bao rolled up the curtain and whispered, "Let me see." He didn't dismantle him, and he didn't follow his words. The driver was hesitant, met Man Bao's bright eyes, slowed down the carriage, let it slowly move forward along the driveway, and then rolled up his sleeves and extended his hand to Man Bao. Man Bao put on his pulse, closed his eyes and listened carefully to the pulse, frowned after a while. "This is not an epidemic, but it seems that you have eaten something bad." Man Bao frowned and asked, "Your diet has been cold recently. I think you ate something good, and that's why you have diarrhea." The coachman asked blankly, "What is xyli?" "It's like croton, senna, and the like. You have diarrhea if you eat it." The driver shook his head again and again. "How dare we eat something like this? Isn't this sending your life forward?" But he quickly reacted. He was afraid of being killed. But why? He is the only one who drives people's cars. He usually cleans the corridors. He does hard work and doesn't offend anyone. Man Bao had already opened the medicine box and sat directly on the cab with him. "Come on, this road is fairly smooth, slow down and I'll give you a few injections." "These needles are all stuck on the arm," Man Bao said while sticking. "There are 2 sets of needles. If you can come back late, you will arrive at Changqing Lane in a while. You will stay for 3/4 of an hour, and I will give you the stomach. Put a few stitches on it, it's better and faster." The driver was very grateful. Man Bao put needles in both of his hands, then let him sit aside and took the reins himself to drive the car. The driver was startled when he saw it, and said quickly, "How dare you let Dr. Zhou Xiao drive the car?" Man Bao said indifferently, "You can't move now, don't worry, I can drive." She has studied it seriously. Although she is not as good as Bai Shan, the road is so flat and the lanes are planned. As long as you slow down, what's the problem? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1423. The driver's face was flushed, very embarrassed, and moved. Man Bao drove the carriage to Ji Shitang, and the carriage walked slowly. When she arrived at Ji Shitang, she pulled the needle from the driver's hand and entered the pharmacy. After a while, she took out a porcelain bottle and handed it to the driver. "This is a pill, 2 pills a day, you can take it back and eat it." The coachman took it in a daze, reached into his arms and took out a purse to stuff it into Man Bao, but Man Bao smiled and declined. "No need, this pill is not worth much, it should have been prescribed for you, but if you catch it, after taking the medicine, you are afraid that you will not be able to boil the medicine, so I gave you the pills. The effect of pills is not as good as that of decoctions, so you are afraid that you will eat for a while longer, and pay attention to some diets when you go back." The driver responded again and again. In fact, he didn't have much money, so he was in a dilemma with his wallet. Man Bao simply pushed his wallet into his arms, then stepped on the horse bench and got into the car, smiling, "Let's go, I'll have to give you needles later." As a result, the carriage had only walked for a while, and when it was about to turn into Changqing Lane, the carriage fell down with a thud, and the left wheel broke directly. Fall. The pedestrian screamed and ran away to avoid it. Man Bao sat in the car and fell to the left. She quickly reached out to grab the right window, but suddenly a large bag was thrown outside, and it fell directly into her arms. "Come out." Man Bao's eyes widened in surprise, holding the soft lotus leaf wrapped in his arms and about to scream. Keek said in a timely manner, "It's the heart of a pig." Liver and kidney. Man Bao swallowed the scream that came to her mouth. She trembled and leaned in the carriage on the left, looking down at the things in her arms. It seemed to confirm that it was indeed the heart, liver, and kidney of a pig, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Their car didn't go fast, and the road was slower because there were many people on the road, so the car didn't back up violently, but it was scary enough that the car suddenly fell to one side. There were many people on the road screaming in surprise. When the car backed up, the horse was frightened, but it didn't do much. As soon as the pedestrians screamed, it became a little restless. The driver also rolled off the car. When he looked up, he saw his hoofs running, thinking that Dr. Zhou Xiao was still in the car. Inside, he was so frightened that his heart was torn apart. He immediately got up and grabbed the reins. The horse stomped uneasily, but it did stop. The driver secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and was about to turn around to help Man Bao out, when the already quiet horse suddenly neighed, raised its hoofs and ran. The driver was startled, and subconsciously he was about to let go of the reins in his hand. Thinking of Dr. Zhou Xiao who was in the car, he immediately grabbed it. But the horse was frightened and the speed was too fast. He was dragged and slammed into the wall of the car. He didn't care about the pain. He was obviously thin and small, but he didn't know where the strength came from. He was dragged by the horse on the ground for a while, but he really stabilized his body and pulled the horse into a corner. It turned its head and slammed it. Entering a shop, because the door is smaller than the carriage, it stuck directly on the door, and the horse stopped. Man Bao only saw what was in her arms at that time, and Zhang Zhang was relieved, but the carriage suddenly overturned and went straight forward. She fell down and only threw the things in her hands into the system subconsciously, and then a whirlwind. Man Bao slammed into the wall of the carriage. When the carriage stopped, she didn't care about the pain, so she hurriedly climbed out of the carriage, but as soon as the curtain was lifted, she saw that she was in the house. She stared at the shopkeeper who was lying on the ground, and then she could see where the carriage was. Man Bao is about to cry. How much will it cost? She hurriedly got off the carriage and looked around. Where's my coachman? The driver was outside the door, and fell on the side of the wheel, and he was about to be run over by the wheel. The carriage directly blocked the door, and Man Bao couldn't get out at all, so she could only turn around to help the store and apologize repeatedly. The store owner was startled by the horse that suddenly rushed in, but he was still weak at this time. Fortunately, he dodged quickly and was not hit. But at this moment, he was too frightened, and Man Bao helped him twice before he helped him up. The people around the outside immediately reached out to help, and carried the coachman aside first, but did not dare to move the carriage. After all, the carriage was still wearing a horse. What if the horse went crazy again? Man Bao didn't care about the pain in his back, so he hurried to untie the horse, and after putting the car down, the people outside helped to drag the car back. The car was towed out, and Man Bao immediately rushed out to look at the driver. He was dragged hard, his back was full of blood, and Man Bao's eyes were red. He quickly reached out and touched his pulse, making sure that the pulse was fine, and it seemed that there was no major internal injury, and he was relieved. The guy from Ji Shitang, who was not too far away, heard the sound and ran over. Seeing that it was Dr. Zhou Xiao's car, he turned around and ran back. After a while, not only the staff and doctors from Ji Shitang came running, but also the doctors from the Bohe Medical Center next door and the doctors from Baiko Tang. Everyone first glanced at Man Bao, and immediately turned to the driver on the ground after she felt that she had nothing to do. Dr. Ding immediately called, "Quick, quick, bring the door panel and carry the person back, be lighter, there may be fractures on the body." The doctor from the nearest Baohe Medical Center couldn't help but said, "It seems that we came first, Dr. Zhou Xiao, why don't you send people to us?" Go, Dr. Zhou Xiao is the doctor of our Ji Shitang, and if you want to go, you will also go to our Ji Shitang." After all, for fear that the two of them would be robbing people, they immediately surrounded the coachman, and then reached out and touched him. After a while, he said, "The hand is fine, but the left leg seems to be broken. Does it hurt here?" The driver almost cried, choked, and said, "It hurts." He was in pain all over, and was about to die. Man Bao was also afraid of death. Although she didn't see it, she heard everyone say that he was dragged to the ground and turned the horse 90 degrees, which made him very frightened. Together with Dr. Ding and others, she carefully lifted him to the door, and then everyone was going back to the pharmacy. Man Bao remembered, what, turned around and climbed into the car, took out the medicine box, and took out the package that was left in the system, stood on the sloping cab and watched the people watching the lively around, holding hands. The thing on the top asked, "Whose is this heart, liver, and kidney?" The onlookers were startled, and when the cowardly saw the blood stains outside the lotus leaf, they couldn't help kneeling on the ground. Dr. Ding was also startled, and asked with shaking lips, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, where did you get this thing?" Man Bao said in a deep voice, "When the carriage fell, someone threw it into my arms. Who did it?" Everyone took a step back, their faces turned pale, and they all shook their heads. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1424. When they were in fear, the soldiers of Jingzhou Mansion finally came, and they didn't come too late, because only a quarter of an hour had passed since the will broke. They ran over to surround the scene, and when they saw Zhou Man standing on the carriage, their hearts sank, and when they looked at the carriage she was sitting on, their hearts trembled even more. Zhou Man is a famous person in the capital, and the officers and soldiers of Jingzhou Mansion certainly recognize her, not to mention that she has a good relationship with the young master and has experienced assassination before. Meet her. Beihu, who ran over, saw what she was holding, and even after she had been on the battlefield, she couldn't help but tremble, and asked in a deep voice, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, what are you holding in your hand?" "I don't know who threw it into my car," Man Bao said through gritted teeth. "Why, you want to scare me? It's beautiful, I tell you. If no one claims it, I will take it back and eat it." Crowd. Dr. Ding was the first to come back to his senses, patted his chest and asked Man Bao, "What kind of heart, liver, and kidney is this?" Pig's Man Bao was also a little depressed. Since he was intimidating her, he didn't need to pay a little more. If he didn't have the heart, liver, and kidney of a cow, he would at least have a sheep, right? She jumped out of the cab, brought up the medicine box, and said, "Go back and treat him first." 100 households in Jingzhou Mansion quickly stopped Man Bao to ask questions, and Dr. Ding said, "Just leave it to us, you can deal with this side first." Then someone was asked to carry the person on the door panel away, and Zhenggu and Lu Yunu stayed behind to accompany Man Bao. The doctor from Ji Shitang left, and the doctors from other hospitals thought for a while, and finally discussed it. The loser was forced to go back to the hall, and the rest stayed to watch the fun. Beihu breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that it was the heart, liver, and kidney of a pig, and then brought people forward to clean up the accident scene. The question should be asked, the investigation should be investigated, and, of course, the parties involved in the accident should be reconciled. Not only him, but Man Bao knew that she was being plotted, and the perpetrator didn't know who it was. But in the eyes of the world, it was her carriage that rushed into the store, so what else could be done? Of course you can only pay for it yourself. Man Bao apologized apologetically to the store owner. After the loss was approved, the two sides agreed to pay the compensation. Man Bao wrote him the address and asked him to come to his house tomorrow to get it. Because the people from Jingzhou Mansion are there, the store owner is not afraid of her defaulting on her bill, and since it is not far from Ji Shitang, he also knows Man Bao. Man Bao and the person who suffered the loss signed the agreement, and then began to stare at Beihu, exhorting, you must find out who did it. In such a short time, she lost 48 taels, almost 10 months' salary. Thinking that the coachman was still lying down, not knowing what his injuries were, Man Bao became even more angry, and she said angrily, "Grab the man and let him have a taste of being dragged away by a horse." Beihu smiled, "Don't care what happens in the future, anyway, it's time to do it now." Zhenggu felt that she was talking about a child, so he stepped forward to negotiate with the officers and soldiers on her behalf. Dr. Lu held Man Bao to the side and asked, "Master, are you injured?" Man Bao had already checked himself just now. Although the hit hurts a lot, there is really no injury. At most, he has a little bruise on his body, most of which is a contusion. After dealing with this, Man Bao returned to Ji Shitang with Zhenggu and the others. Dr. Ding was still dealing with the injury of the driver, so Dr. Tao checked Man Bao and nodded, "It's fine, use the ointment from our store to wipe it off. It'll be fine in 2 or 3 days." Sanya breathed a sigh of relief. She was in the backyard just now to identify medicinal herbs, and she took it to heart when she heard the excitement outside. Anyway, the pharmacy would be lively from time to time, and occasionally there would be patients or their family members crying. She was used to it. As a result, the third senior brother suddenly ran in from the outside, saying that something had happened to the little ant's carriage. As soon as she ran out, she happened to see the little ant being supported by the second senior sister to enter the door, and there was a lot of blood on the front of her clothes. She was shocked. Still Man Bao said, "This is pig blood." Sanya breathed a sigh of relief. Man Bao took the ointment, washed his hands, and went into the clinic to see the driver. Dr. Ding has quick hands and feet, not only gave him medicine, but also connected his legs. Seeing Man Bao come in, he smiled and said, "It's okay, it's not serious, I touched it and one of my legs was broken, but the rib seems to be broken too, it may just be a bone fracture, fortunately there is no subsidence, the internal organs all fine." Man Bao did not speak with a sullen face, but the coachman lying on the bed breathed a sigh of relief. Although his face was pale, he actually felt that his stomach didn't hurt anymore. You know, since he left the palace, he has been suffering from a dull pain in his abdomen, for fear that he could not help pulling on him. Man Bao took a look at his face, felt his pulse and nodded to Dr. Ding, "There is Dr. Lauding." Dr. Ding smiled and said, "You're welcome." He cleaned his hands and said to Man Bao, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, let him rest for a while, let's go out and sit down." Man Bao nodded and went out with Dr. Ding. She asked, "Did you hit your head?" Dr. Ding shook his head, he said, "No, I checked and there was a big bag on his forehead, but he didn't have dizziness, so it shouldn't be a big problem." As a doctor, the most afraid of impact injuries are head injuries and internal bleeding. Generally, as long as these two are okay, the others are just minor problems. The lame leg and the broken hand are fine in the eyes of the doctors. The shopkeeper Zhengda had asked someone to fry a bowl of soothing soup for her. Although Man Bao felt that he didn't need it, he still drank it. Then the doctors sat together and sighed. Dr. Ding and the others didn't dare to ask the truth. They checked the coachman just now and found that he was a servant, so they knew that he came from the palace. Obviously, Man Bao just came out of the palace. Then she couldn't ask why she was in danger. Others don't have to ask, but the shopkeeper Zhengda couldn't help it, mainly because their family has a deep relationship with the palace, and Man Bao has a deep relationship with Ji Shitang. When everyone went out, he lowered his voice and asked, "His Royal Highness's illness?" Man Bao glanced at him and said, "It's getting better." As before, but in light of today's events, shopkeeper Zhengda sighed, "They can't bear it anymore." Man Bao rubbed his sore arm without speaking. After a while, she got up and went out, found the bag that had been left in her arms, opened it directly, checked out the pig kidney and liver, and handed it over to Zhou Liru, "Go and simmer. Feed the driver." Zhou Liru took it and confirmed, "Little ant, let me simmer." She is not afraid of this. She has eaten pig kidneys and livers at home. What's so scary? Mainly, she was afraid that when she made it, others would not be able to eat it. Wouldn't it be a waste? Man Bao also doubted her cooking skills, and after thinking about it, he simply took over and made it himself. Shopkeeper Zhengde, Dr. Ding, and the others watched her squatting in the backyard to wash the pig kidney and liver, cut it and threw it in a jar, then picked up 2 herbs and threw them in and simmered on the fire. Crowd. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1425. Shopkeeper Zheng came back to his senses and asked, "He has diarrhea?" Man Bao nodded, "I ate bad food and had diarrhea due to deficient cold." All the doctors can accept this, mainly because the way Man Bao cut the pig kidney and liver just now was a little scary. Zhou Liru didn't know anything, and asked curiously, "Why should you eat pig kidney and pig liver for diarrhea?" Man Bao said, "This is a recipe for blindness. It is considered as a medicinal diet. It has the ability to drive away cold and stop diarrhea. Remember, if diarrhea is caused by deficiency cold in the future, you can try this recipe." Zhou Liru nodded in a daze. After the pig kidney and liver were simmered, Man Bao poured him a bowl and gave it to him to eat. Then he remembered and asked, "You have been driving the car for me, and you forgot to ask your name." The driver lowered his head and whispered, "The servant has no name. My surname is Rong. I'm the 4th in the family. They all call me Rongsi." He entered the palace too early. He had neither worshipped his master nor served his master, so no one gave him a name. When he entered the palace, he called him Gauden, but out of 10 eunuchs, 4 were named Gauden, so everyone would not give him a name. Love is so called, basically it is about their ranking in the family. If you can't even remember the ranking of your family, you can choose a name for yourself. But he wasn't smart enough, couldn't read, and couldn't pick up, so he was always called Rong Si. Man Bao nodded and said, "Hurry up and eat, this is to stop diarrhea. I think someone from the palace will come to pick you up in a while." Rong Si almost cried. He didn't know if he could survive this time. He didn't dare to look up. Even if his nose was stuffed, he quickly ate the soup in the bowl together with the liver and kidney. Man Bao said quickly, "Slow down, don't choke." Rong Si didn't choke. He knew how to eat quickly and without choke, without making a sound. Not long after, someone came from the palace. Man Bao gave him a look, and went out to meet those who came to pick them up. Contrary to Man Bao's expectations, Eunuch Wu personally came to pick him up. Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief. She was familiar with Eunuch Wu, and she was easier to talk to. She and Eunuch Wu solemnly thanked Rong Si, and then handed Eunuch Wu the medicine that had been prepared a long time ago, and said with a smile, "This is the medicine I caught for him. Eunuch, help me to give it to the person who takes care of him." Along with the medicine, he also gave him a money bag. She sighed, "Thanks to him for this trip. If he hadn't held the horse tightly, I would have fallen to my death." She said, "Fortunately, his injury is not very serious. The day after tomorrow, I will take a look at the palace and take a look. It should be fine to rest for a while." Eunuch Wu was stunned for a moment, then took the medicinal materials and the money bag with a smile, glanced at Rong Si who was lying inside and said softly, "This is Dr. Zhou's great fortune, and it is also his blessing. Isn't it his luck?" Eunuch Wu thought with the medicinal materials, whether he saves Zhou Man or not, if Zhou Man dies or is seriously injured, he will surely die as a driver. But in times of danger, few people can think of this, mostly relying on instinct. So Rong Si was willing to take his life to save Zhou Man. He said it was Zhou Man's blessing. The slave and savior should have his share, but Zhou Man was willing to tell him, the head of the East Palace, for him. This is the blessing of Rong Si. How many masters turned around and left after being rescued? Maybe they turned around and forgot the number of people under them. At most, they would reward some gold and silver. Who would remember to take a look? Eunuch Wu didn't come to pick up Rong Si on purpose. He came to see Zhou Man on behalf of the prince and the concubine. After confirming that Zhou Man was all right, he comforted her for a while, and then he took Rong Si away with someone. Because of Man Bao's words, Eunuch Wu did not directly throw the person into the execution hall, but directly questioned him in a side room. He sat on the chair, wiped his hands with the handkerchief, and then looked down at Rong Si, who was lying on the wooden board, and said with no expression, "I heard from your roommate that you have not been in good health for the past 2 days. Why are you still waiting here?" Rong Si shivered, and quickly said, The small one just broke his stomach and went to the toilet 2 more times. He feels that it doesn't matter, and he doesn't dare to slack off his errands." Eunuch Wu asked carefully, from when he started to have diarrhea, and what time he ate and what he ate. Especially about what happened today, he asked back and forth 3 times until it was dark outside, and he was so frightened that he was dripping with cold sweat, and then he waved someone to take him down. Eunuch Wu thought for a while and said, "I will be locked in the side hall, and someone will take care of it. The medicine brought back by our family will be boiled for him to drink. Follow suit." Eunuch Wu then walked to Rong Si's side and said condescendingly, "You are lucky, you met Dr. Zhou Xiao, otherwise, you would be dead just because you concealed your illness and served close to the Lord." Rong Si shivered and hurriedly pleaded guilty. Eunuch Wu snorted coldly, turned around and left. "Who is Zhou Man?" "She is the doctor of the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess, so close. There are epidemics around her, and it is possible to pass the disease on to the Prince and the Princess. Generally, people who are close to her are not in the palace. They can't control other people's homes. Take it to the master?" Rong Si's illness had better be calculated by someone. If he had the intention to approach Zhou Man, it would not be as simple as a dead end. Eunuch Wu went to report to the prince. Bai Shan took Man Bao back home. He learned the news from Yin Or and rushed to pick him up. In the car, Man Bao said, "Don't tell the family about this." Bai Shan frowned. Man Bao said, "There are too many people in the family, and scaring them is just a waste of time. Don't worry, the prince is not made of clay." During this time, she has been staring at the prince, and she has seen the other side of him. The prince she has seen is always irritable and willful, but she has stared at it a lot, and she knows that he is still very rational when dealing with government affairs, and he has no brains. Question. She turned her head and said to Sanya, "Don't tell anyone." Zhou Liru nodded. She naturally listened to her sister-in-law. Bai Erlang saw that she was discussing with a person and exhorting him, but he ignored him and couldn't help asking, "Aren't you going to exhort me?" Man Bao blinked, but before he could speak, Bai Shan slapped his hand rudely and patted him directly on the shoulder. "Are you still young? Do you have to tell me this?" Bai Erlang hummed and said, "You always have something to hide from me, and I'm not happy to accompany you to hide it together. Don't you have something to hide from us? Don't think I didn't know that you and someone made an appointment to go out to the eastern suburbs and race horses." Bai Erlang was stunned and asked, "How did you know?" Bai Shan, "Guess what?" "Shiro." Bai Shan smiled and said, "Just guess, if Brother Hall knew you were going to the horse race, what would he do to you?" "Will definitely press him to the ground and rub, and rub again." Bai Erlang looked expectant. Bai Shan said, "I won't talk about you." Bai Erlang immediately said, "I don't know about you either." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1426. Man Bao said, I also want to go out on a horseback ride. Bai Shan said, it's dangerous now, wait for Daji to come back. He sighed, I don't know when Daji will be able to finish his family affairs and come back. Always have peace of mind when there is good luck. Man Bao also nodded. But this time he came here to relocate with his family. They wouldn't send letters to urge him. What if he hurried over and lost something? Man Bao went back to the house and asked Zhou Liru to help her with medicine for her back bruise. She is the purest of all people, and adults avoid children intentionally when they speak, so she thought it was a simple accident and said, Little aunt, do we have to take care of the driver? Man Bao nodded, almost. Do you have enough money? Zhou Liru still didn't know how much the medicinal materials cost, but seeing that Rong Si was so seriously injured, it should cost a lot of money. Man Bao said, enough, don't worry about money. Although she was also heartbroken, she could still get the money for the medicine. Man Bao pretended to be fine after lunch and went back to the room to rest, then leaned on his back with a soft pillow, and then exhaled comfortably, immersed himself in his consciousness to see the prince. Usually, she watched the video recorded the day before, but today she watched it synchronously. Someone was reporting the news to the prince. At that time, there were many people watching and it was chaotic. No one present saw anyone throwing something into the car, but someone in the tea house in the distance saw it, but it was not very accurate. Someone has been sent to investigate. The prince's hand holding the pen trembled. This is anger. He has a bad temper. The crown princess suggested that he practice calligraphy to suppress his temper. Recently, the two of them are like mixing oil in honey, so he listened, but now he wants to throw the pen away and slap the table to lose his temper, but thinking about it is not worth it, and it will hurt the body like Zhou Man said, so he snorted and asked, is Hoji watching? Look, I haven't noticed any changes for the time being. Continue to stare, I have to see if I'm alone. What kind of bulls, ghosts, snakes, and gods are these? Yes. He stepped aside, and Eunuch Wu stepped forward to report, the servant has been sent to investigate, and the ones who usually drive the car to Drzhou are called Rong Si and Zhao Ding, but Zhao Ding loves to be lazy and doesn't have much oil or water to follow Drzhou, so this is often the case. The job is left to Rong Si. But Rong Si suddenly had a stomach upset 2 days ago. It wasn't very serious. He didn't dare to ask for leave. It was sawed by someone, and if it was at the usual speed, I'm afraid it would fall after leaving the imperial city. The road is wide and there are almost no pedestrians. The coachmen have an old problem. Once they leave the imperial city, they like to speed up and make the horse run faster. At high speed, the wheel breaks. The two of them are really fierce. Today was also a coincidence. Dr. Zhou Xiao saw that Rong Si was not feeling well, so he kindly gave him a needle and let the carriage go slowly and leisurely, and then he escaped the disaster. Eunuch Wu didn't say these words, but the prince and the others also knew. Eunuch Wu continued, the slaves took the people in Rong Si's room, and they found the person who administered the medicine. They blocked their mouths and didn't let him take the poison, but this interrogation. The prince said blankly, send it to the execution hall. Eunuch Wu responded in a low voice. The prince was about to drop his pen, remembered something, and lightened the halfway action, but still slapped it on the table with a snap. Eunuch Wu and others are used to it, and their eyebrows and eyes don't even jump. The prince said, tomorrow, let someone pick up Zhou Man, and send a team of forbidden troops from the East Palace. I just want to see, who would dare to do it? Eunuch Wu couldn't help reminding, His Royal Highness, the day after tomorrow is the day to see a doctor. The prince glanced at him and said, then take it in and show it to the crown prince. What's wrong with the acupuncture for one more day? He didn't speak when he was stabbed, what was he worried about? Eunuch Wu hurriedly responded, and sent the imperial army out of the palace to pick up people early the next morning. Man Bao was escorted into the palace with the medicine box on his face, and the prince and concubine looked at each other in the East Palace. Finally, he was dragged by the prince to the small study to play a game of chess and admired 2 pots of flowers. Take her out of the palace. Man Bao insisted not to give the prince acupuncture. She said, Your Highness, this is the cycle. Your body is already suitable for the next day's conditioning. If it is suddenly encrypted, it will be confused. Prince, this is Gu's body, how can Gu not know that it will be ignorant? But Man Bao said it would be, and the prince didn't really want to tie it. She didn't want to, and he was too lazy to tie it, so Man Bao played for a long time and had a good dinner by the way, and then he carried it. The untouched medicine box left the palace. As a result, just after leaving the East Palace, he met the Empress Dowager, and the Empress Dowager wanted to summon her. Seeing that she was nervous, the palace servant who was ordered to pick her up by the Queen Mother whispered about the matter of the Emperor and the Queen worshipping Buddha some time ago. She mentioned this matter specially to tell Man Bao that the Emperor and Queen are very concerned about the prince's condition, and the Queen Mother is also very concerned about the prince. Your Highness, that's why she announced her to answer, so that she should not be afraid. Man Bao smiled and followed behind the palace servant with the medicine box. Whether she believed it or not, she had to express her belief on her face anyway. At that time, this palace person intercepted her outside the East Palace, and the palace maid of the East Palace should have gone back to report to the prince and the crown princess by now. To be honest, she wasn't very scared. If the Queen Mother wanted to bully her, she would not choose it at such a sensitive time. She had to know that she had an accident yesterday, and now everyone is investigating the mastermind behind the scenes. The Queen Mother is not stupid, she will choose to trouble her at this time. Man Bao murmured in his heart, carrying the medicine box all the way to the Queen Mother's palace. Unfortunately, Xiao Yuan was in the process of asking for the Queen Mother's pulse, and was about to exit when he saw Man Bao coming in with a large medicine box. He couldn't help but frown, and then stopped slightly. The maid in the Queen Mother's palace whispered doubtfully, Xiao Yuanzhang. Xiao Yuanzhang smiled at him, then bowed and walked out, but his heart sank. I don't know why the Queen Mother summoned Zhou Man. Zhou Man and Xiao Yuan nodded and said hello, then stepped forward, put the medicine box beside them, knelt down and said, I see the Queen Mother is blessed with longevity and well-being. After a long time, a voice came from above, be flat. Man Bao got up, raised his eyes slightly and looked up quietly. Seeing that the Queen Mother was leaning on the couch, it was her palace maid who was announcing, so he lowered his head slightly again. The Queen Mother looked down at her for a while and said, come up and let me see. Man Bao stepped forward. Only then did the Queen Mother see her clearly, stared at her expression and asked, Ijia heard that the prince's condition has improved. Man Bao bowed his head and said yes. The Queen Mother turned the beads in her hand and asked, so you have cured the prince? Man Bao replied thoughtfully, it's not all finished yet, the crown prince is weak, and it will take some time to raise it, but it may be possible to give it a try now. She whispered, as long as you don't indulge, you won't damage your body anymore. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1427. The Queen Mother looked up at her, but only saw the black hair on the top of her head. Although her eyes were not very good, she still vaguely remembered that she raised her head slightly when she just knelt below. She snorted coldly in her heart, but she felt good. She also had no intention of talking too much with Zhou Man. She didn't want to talk to her at first. She estimated that the time was enough, so she waved her hand and said, you will serve the prince carefully in the future and cure the prince's illness. Of course it has your advantage. Man Bao respectfully responded. The Queen Mother closed her eyes slightly and said, go back. The maid behind her said loudly, reward. Man Bao couldn't understand the meaning of these words for a while, and when he exited the palace with the medicine box and saw the things held in the hands of many palace maids and eunuchs, he knew that it was a reward for her. Man Bao once thought that this thing was poisoned. Confused, she walked out of the palace following the palace and the rewarded team. The place where the Queen Mother lived was too far, and it took a long time to walk to the gate of the palace. Man Bao was carrying a heavy medicine box back and forth, and his hands were almost sore. A group of people went out of the Queen Mother's palace in a mighty manner, and when the anxious prince heard the words in the Queen's palace, he turned his head to look at the Queen in surprise. The Queen had already anticipated it, put down the teacup and said with a smile, "How about it? I said your grandmother wouldn't embarrass her, right?" The prince's concubine hurriedly saluted on behalf of the prince and apologized. It was the sons and ministers who misunderstood the grandmother. The queen took her hand and said with a smile, "The Queen Mother is also the mother of the country and the grandmother of Dallin. She also loves Dallin very much, and naturally she won't do anything to embarrass him." She glanced at the prince sitting on the side, teaching him and the prince concubine, as the mother of the country, she should focus on the overall situation. The Queen Mother favors the King of Yazhu because it is the nature of the mother and son, but treating Zhou Man favorably is to benefit the country, the people, and the stability. The move of the court is rational. In front of the country and the overall situation, personal grievances are not worth mentioning. The prince didn't know whether he heard it or not, but the princess was shocked and saluted thoughtfully. Seeing that she understood, the queen smiled with satisfaction. She turned to look at Aunt Chang, and said, "Please give me and your majesty's things as well, and you can deliver it to Changqing Lane in person." Aunt Chang bowed her head and bowed to exit. When they were gone, the queen said to the prince and the princess, "It's right for you to treat Zhou Man coldly during this time. It's not good for you to express your love for her in front of outsiders. In the future, we will be elders. It's also good to deter those ghosts and sprites." Prince. The crown princess was also speechless, daring not to let the queen notice their original intentions, and hurriedly responded. The queen nodded and said with a smile, "Okay, you all go back. Your Majesty has handed over this matter to Jing Zheyin to investigate. I think there will be news soon." It was not handed over to Feng Shangshu, but to Yin Li. Obviously this time the emperor wanted to investigate thoroughly. The crown prince was expressionless, and he didn't know what to think. He and the crown prince said goodbye and left. When the crown princess looked up and saw the prince's gloomy face, she knew that he was still angry, so she took a few steps to keep up with him, reached out to hold his hand, and said softly, "Your Highness, should we go and see the Queen's grandmother?" The Queen Mother endured the disgust to summon Zhou Man, and rewarded her with so many things, of course, not because she liked her, but to support the prince, expressing her, and even the attitude of the upper class of the royal family. Even a person like her who hates Zhou Man so much has to retreat before the crown prince's heir. Whoever dares to trouble Zhou Man in the future will be against the entire royal family. The prince thought about it and nodded, "Go." The Queen Mother was not in good health, and she became sleepy after seeing Zhou Man. She was about to lie down and rest. When she heard that the prince and his wife were coming, she couldn't help but smile and let people put them in. Seeing that the prince's face was not very good, she patted his hand to reassure him, "Don't worry, I are also angry this time. No matter who is behind him, he will not let him go easily." The Queen Mother wanted to say something, but she was not easy to speak. After a while, she sighed, "You are a good boy. If you have nothing to do, go see your mother more and listen to her. There has always been some tension between the prince and the emperor, and he has a better relationship with the queen. In fact, she still hopes that he and the third prince can get along peacefully. They are both her grandsons. For such a position, from the previous dynasty to the present, it has never been peaceful." The Queen Mother was so tired that she didn't want to talk anymore, so she waved them back to rest. The prince and the princess hurriedly bowed and retired. Man Bao was escorted out of the palace in a mighty manner, and just returned to Changqing Lane. The Queen Mother's ceremony had just moved in. Before she could sit down and drink a sip of tea, Aunt Chang came again with the Emperor and the Queen's reward. More people came this time, including Yiji. Mr. Zhuang hurriedly led the family to kneel and listen to the reward. After sending the people away, everyone looked at the gift boxes in the yard together in silence. This time, the Emperor's reward was much more generous, not only cloth, porcelain, but also spices, gems, and medicinal materials. Among them is a box of spices, which is pungent when opened. Others don't know the goods, but Man Bao is a doctor. Mr. Zhuang is also well informed. After seeing it, he smiled and said, "Just this box of spices, you can be in the outer city. It's a small house." Xiang Chao Vinian, who just got up, was surprised and almost knelt down again. He stared at the contents of the box, and found that he hadn't seen it before, so he asked curiously, "What's the use of this thing?" Man Bao said, "Pepper, a very expensive spice. I have seen it at the storekeeper Zheng Da. He said that it was bought from Hushang. 1 tael of pepper and 1 tael of gold. It can be used as medicine, or you can carry it with you." Man Bao was very surprised. How could the Emperor and the Queen reward her for such a precious thing? This spice can only be imported from the western regions. I heard that Hushang had to go through Tubo, Nibra, and then Tianzi to buy this kind of thing. I don't know how many hands it takes to get to the capital, so this kind of spice has always been very precious. Man Bao only saw it when he was sitting in the pharmacy, but the shopkeeper Zhengda was also very careful, even more careful than ginseng and Ganoderma lucidum. She only showed her a glance and smelled her nose. Thinking of this, Man Bao reached out and took one out of the box, squeezed it, and put it under his nose to smell it, almost sneezing. Xiang Chao asked curiously, "Why did the Emperor and the Queen suddenly reward you with so much? Did you cure the prince's illness?" "It's almost, but I can't tell him that," so Man Bao said, "Not yet." Mr. Zhuang glanced at her. There were not many people in the family at this time, only a few of them were there. After thinking about it, he still didn't ask her. When the child is old, it is not easy to intervene too much. Keek, who had been silent all the time, suddenly said, "Include one." Man Bao squeezed the one in his palm. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1428. Man Bao was picking and choosing among the piles of things, and sent a set of expensive tea sets to the husband, and a piece of fabric suitable for men to brother Xiang Mingxiu, and the rest were sent to the room. Man Bao put the pepper into the system, and asked curiously, "Do you have this thing there?" "Yes, but the genetic data is different, it belongs to the ancient species, so it is not sure how many bonus points there are, but it is better than nothing. She has a box." Man Bao felt the same way. Points are more important to her now. Last time, Bai Shan found an opportunity to go out and bought a mule and a donkey for her. The two secretly recorded it without causing any suspicion. Man Bao just put the things away and stuffed the especially valuable spices and gems into the system space. There was a knock on the door, and Xiang Chaozhe said, "Man Bao, Master Tang is here." Man Bao hurried out. Master Tang had just met with Mr. Zhuang and Xiang Mingxiu. Seeing that Xiang Mingxiu was able to walk slowly while standing, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. Zhou Man really has 2 points of ability. Although he had never met Xiang Mingxiu, he had always known him. At the beginning, he found out what happened to the Xiang family in Dongzi village. When he entered Beijing, he heard that among the few remaining members of the Xiang family, Xiang Mingxiu was the heir apparent, and he was also the mastermind behind the assassination of the king of Yizhu several times. I heard that the tendons of both his feet were picked. Unexpectedly, Zhou Man really picked up people. After a little thought, Master Tang invited him to stay and talk together. Xiang Mingxiu didn't like Guaner very much, but he agreed. Man Bao was a little nervous when he saw Master Tang, and couldn't help but wink at him. She didn't tell the family about the overturned car yesterday. When Master Tang saw it, he smiled and said, "There is a family outside the alley that makes mutton soup and who cakes well. I was passing by and wanted to invite Man Bao to try it, but I didn't expect to see Xiang Gongzi. I have seen the romance of Xiang Gongzi. Yes, I have always admired it in my heart, so I have the cheek to invite your son to have a meal together." Xiang Mingxiu, the things in the book are mostly fabricated by Bai Er, and Master Tang should know. "I don't think so," Master Tang said with a smile, "things can be made up, this character is tough and clever, but it's true, so I think the young master just doesn't have a chance. If there is a chance, it will definitely be as written in the book." Of Xiang Mingxiu, forget it, he doesn't want to drift with the flood for 2 days and then crash into a secret realm. If he can really float in the flood for 2 days, it could only be a corpse. He doesn't have that much ability. But he still went out with Master Tang to eat mutton soup. Man Bao touched his stomach. He was too nervous when he saw the Queen Mother, mainly because he had walked so far and was really hungry, so he said a word to Mr. Zhuang and left with Mr. Tang. Mr. Zhuang was sure that they were indeed hiding something from him. However, seeing that Master Tang was there, and he didn't look very nervous, he shook his head and sat leisurely on the reclining chair to read a book. Man Bao tore off a piece of the hu cake and soaked it in the mutton soup. After soaking in the soup, he took a bite. The cake was mixed with the fragrance of the soup and the oil and water, which was especially delicious. Master Tang also tore up the cake and threw it into the mutton soup. He smiled and said, "With the Queen Mother's reward, there should be more than half of the people who will trouble you this time." Man Bao glanced at Xiang Mingxiu and saw that he was concentrating on eating. There will always be people who don't know the current affairs, and can't understand the current affairs, Master Tang said meaningfully. The person who exchanged wine for the prince might stop, but the person who gave the prince poison might not stop. This is like a murderer who keeps killing people. Once he starts, he can't stop, not only his heart, but also the people around him will not let him stop. Master Tang said, "So you should be careful when you go in and out these days." He said, "Your Majesty handed over this matter to Lord Yin to investigate. I am helping Lord Yin. Obviously, Your Majesty is very angry this time. Compared with the last time when the prince's wine was changed and the prince was drunk, I heard that the emperor sent people to Luozhu to scold Prince Gong last night. The reason is that he did not cherish the farming season, did not fulfill the duties of a vassal king in one place, and did not even go to the ground to plow and persuade him to teach farming and mulberry. It is about the second dragon looking up in February. But this is a trivial matter. 9 of the 10 vassal kings didn't open the plow, and the common people didn't care. Who would blame this custom? And how long has it been since February 2nd? Man Bao hummed while eating, "I'm a doctor, and he's too domineering. He even takes care of me seeing a doctor." He was talking about the third prince. But Master Tang said meaningfully, "But he may not be him." Man Bao was stunned, blinked, and asked, "Didn't the third prince do it?" Master Tang said with a smile, "I can't find anything yet, and there is no evidence that the third prince did it. Naturally, there is no evidence to prove that the third prince did it, but everyone seems to think that the third prince did it." Man Bao thought about it for a while, and when she came back to it, she lowered her head to eat the cake. Only then did Master Tang look at Xiang Mingxiu. Xiang Mingxiu took the handkerchief aside and wiped his mouth slowly, then asked, "What happened yesterday?" Man Bao felt guilty for a moment and did not speak. Master Tang smiled and talked about the incident of Man Bao's carriage breaking and fell yesterday, and then said, "Young Master Xiang has always been well informed, and I would like to ask Master Xiang for help." Xiang Mingxiu froze, turned to look at Man Bao, and asked, "So the pig heart we ate last night was?" Man Bao nodded. "That person lost it?" Master Tang's hand holding the cake froze slightly, and turned to look at Man Bao. "Did you eat all that heart, liver, and kidney?" Man Bao nodded. Xiang Mingxiu felt a little trembling in his hands and asked, "Liver and kidney? I simmered it for Rong Si when I was in the pharmacy. He had diarrhea, and there was a recipe that used these two." Xiang Mingxiu breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay, it's just a pig's heart." "But..." Xiang Mingxiu couldn't help but tremble, and then said, "In the future, if you throw this kind of thing away, our family doesn't lack that little food money. If you like it, just let Aunt Rong buy it." "No," Man Bao said, "if they dare to give it, I will eat it, and it is not poisonous. What am I afraid of?" Master Tang couldn't help giving her a thumbs up, admiring her. However, Xiang Mingxiu felt something was wrong. After recalling it, he asked, "You didn't eat much of the pig heart last night, did you? Even Bai Shan and Bai Er didn't eat much." Man Bao lowered his head to drink the soup. Xiang Mingxiu threw his head up in anger, so he drank an extra bowl of soup and almost felt that his body had become so heavy that he couldn't walk. But despite this, he still promised that Man Bao would keep it a secret and would not tell Mr. Zhuang and the rest of the family. Master Tang came here today mainly to ask about some details of Man Bao yesterday. After confirming, he settled the bill and left. After he settled the bill, Man Bao bought a pot of soup and a basket of cakes from the store and asked him to deliver it to his home. So when Bai Shan and the others came back from school, the dinner at home was sheep soup and hu cakes, and the kitchen made a few more dishes. Not to mention, it was delicious. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1429. It was not until noon the next day that the imperial guards and carriages from the East Palace appeared in the Ji Shitang, and they brought Man Bao into the palace to see the crown prince. Afterwards, the imperial guard escorted her back to Changqing Lane, which was very safe all the way. As soon as Man Baoke returned home, the concierge delivered a message saying, "Miss Man, this is from a manager today." Man Bao opened it and glanced at it. It was an invitation from the Li family. Mrs. Li San's child invited her to attend the day after tomorrow. That child was cut out by her, and it is very fateful to say it. After seeing her, the concierge said, "Today, the old lady sent a message, saying that a good luck letter has arrived, and the person will arrive early tomorrow morning." Man Bao's eyes lit up. "Are you going home tomorrow?" The concierge nodded. The old lady said, "Daji's letter said that his parents didn't want to leave the country, so he only brought his wife and children here and asked if we could arrange it here. If we can't arrange it, let them live until the second go to Liuxiang." "It can be arranged," Man Bao said happily. "We have already arranged it. Bai Bowen and Bai Shuping can live in a main room in the front yard. The space is not small. The beds can be combined. If their brothers are not used to sleeping together, they can also be separated. Just like Bai Shan and Bai Erlang before, the middle just across a screen. Bai Shuping wants to study, and there is an empty table in the study here. The schools in Beijing Middle School have only just started, so it's okay to plug in at this time. I don't know how Bai Bowen will arrange it, but Daji must have an idea." Man Bao happily ran into the backyard with the post, told Mr. Zhuang and his brother Xiang Jia that this was a good thing, and then pulled Xiang Chao to help clean the room. When Bai Shan and the others came back and heard about it, they also went about their business happily, and then the next morning everyone waited for Daji to come back. "That's right, they're taking a break today." Even Bai Shan couldn't help but said, "We're really lucky." Everyone nodded together, yes. Early in the morning, 2 mule carts came in from the alley. Man Bao saw Daji sitting on the cart with sharp eyes, jumped up happily, and waved to him with Bai Shan and the others, "Daji, Daji." The coachman on the side looked quite sad, he felt that he was going to lose his job. Mrs. Lu gave him Daji's body deed. After Daji returned to Xianyang County, he first organized a funeral for Urji, and after he was buried, he took the release book and body deed to the Yamen to change the good book. He wanted to bring his parents to the capital together, but they were slaves for generations and had been living in the Bai family's village, and did not want to leave their hometown. He persuaded them for a long time, but they were unwilling to leave. Only then did Daji pack up and bring his wife and children over. Moving as a family requires a lot of things to be moved, and the speed is much slower. It was the first time Meng Shi and Bai Shuping saw Bai Shan, and they were a little cautious for a while. But Bai Shan was very kind, and he didn't see them as people at the moment, and they were indeed not servants at this time. When they settled down, Bai Shan asked Daji, "Have you found Shuping's school? Would you like to try Songhe Academy?" Daji naturally trusted Bai Shan, and nodded, indicating that he could try it. As for Bai Bowen, Daji thought about where to go earlier. He wants to go to practice martial arts. I met some friends by darts in the early years, and there happens to be an escort bureau in the capital. I will take him to see it tomorrow. Daji then asked the two of them, "How are you and Miss Man lately?" The two nodded together, indicating that it was fine. But Daji still knew about Manbao's car overturned 2 days ago. The two thought it was a secret, and the family didn't know about it, but the news outside could be hidden from Mr. Zhuang and the old Zhou family, but he really couldn't hide from the old lady. But a few children didn't want to talk about it, and the old lady just didn't know. But as soon as Daji came back, the old lady sent someone to tell him, so that he didn't have to worry about Bai Bowen and Bai Shuping. She would arrange it so that he would drive the car to Bai Shan and the others the next day. Because Man Bao has decided to go to the Li family's 100-day banquet tomorrow, and she will bring Bai Shan and Bai Erlang with her. Even Bai Dalan went together. The 100 Days banquet is a formal banquet. The Li family and the Han family are both powerful and noble families. Attending the banquet is a good way to make connections. The Bai family is also an aristocratic family. Even if they don't have any power now and are ranked low, the clan chronicle and genealogy have been carried on their backs since childhood, and they are not afraid to go out. Just missing the opportunity to attend. But isn't this a post full of treasures? She naturally wants to pull the brothers and sisters together. So the next day, everyone dressed up and ran away on their own horses, leaving Bai Dalan behind in the car. He was a little indignant, and said to Daji, "I will buy a horse when I go back." Daji smiled and replied yes, indicating that it should be. In the car, not only Bai Dalan, but also the gifts they prepared, 3 in total. 1 for Man Bao, 1 for Bai Shan, and 1 for Bai Dalan and Bai Erlang. At the door of Li's house, Man Bao jumped off the horse and waited for Bai Dalan with Bai Shan Bai Erlang. The 3 of them were dressed in bright spring clothes, and they were good looking. They stood beside the horse and raised their eyebrows with a smile, which made the people who just got off the bus take a few more glances. Bai Dalan's carriage arrived, and Man Bao waved a few times and took the post to the door. The steward saw Man Bao a long time ago, and Tet asked a servant to wait for the reception. When they were let in, they heard a little exclamation in front of them. He turned his head to look, and saw Yang Heshu riding on a horse at a glance. He was startled, and quickly ran down, asking his servants to help hold the horses and carts blocking the door. Sure enough, seeing Yang Heshu approaching, some carriages on the side of the road had to get out of the way so that he could pass first. As a result, the avoidance inevitably collided with the carriages next to him, but at this moment, the people who were touched and those who were touched had no opinion at all. The curtain of the car was lifted, and many girls lay on the windows and stared at Yang Heshu, and some even got out of the car to watch. Manbao and the others stood on the steps, looked at Yang Heshu on the horse, and sighed, "It's so beautiful." Even Bai Erlang said, "I didn't think that in Lujiang County before, but when I got to the capital and compared with so many people, I realized that Mr. Yang looks good." Bai Shan nodded. When they were in Qilai village, there were fields before and after. Yang Heshu was good looking, but the crops in the fields were even more beautiful. The main reason was that they hadn't seen much of the world at the time, so they thought they were pretty good looking, so they didn't think about Mr. Yang. "I just like talking to him and playing with him. But when you grow up, you will know that this is good looking." Especially after they went to Yazhu city and came to the capital, they met a lot of people. Only then did they realize that there were so many people outside that none of them were as good looking as Yang Heshu. That's why I think his good looks are invaluable. A few village bumpkins in Manbao are late, and when they know that Yang Heshu is good looking, he has become friends with Yang Heshu, and his good looking becomes natural, so at this time, he is smiling and watching Yang Heshu come over on horseback, saving some fun and gratification. Looking at him. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1430. But the people in the capital are well informed, especially these aristocratic families and dignitaries, who grew up in a heap of beauties. I have known beauty and ugliness since I was a child. I thought I had seen enough beauties, but when I saw Yang Heshu, I realized that there were still too few. Yang Heshu has been prettier than others since he was a child, more delicate than others, and fairer than others. At this moment, everyone silently gave way to him, even those whose net worth was higher than the Yang family also gave way to let him go first. Yang Heshu wanted to follow the rules, but based on past experience, if he refused to stay behind, the scene would be even more chaotic. Therefore, if he is allowed, he will step forward, and if he is not allowed, he will wait quietly behind. Unfortunately, no one stopped him, so he went all the way to the front. He jumped off the horse and helped Kui down before going to the car. Under everyone's attention, Mrs. Kui helped Yang Heshu's men to get out of the car, her face blushing, but after glancing at her husband, she lowered her head and pursed her lips and smiled, and the two walked forward hand in hand. Walking in front of the four-man bow, Yang Heshu raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "Don't you want to go in?" The four Bai Shan nodded in succession, "Come in, come in." The horse and the cart were arranged by their own servants, and they turned around and entered. It's just that there are separate places for men and women to feast on guests. Yang Heshu handed his wife's hand to Manbao and smiled, "Help me take care of her." Manbao's hand just happened to touch her wrist. She felt a move in her heart, her fingers gently put her finger on her pulse to listen, so she raised her eyebrows at the two of them, and the expression was almost the same as Yang and Shu just now. When Mrs. Kui saw it, she lowered her head and smiled shyly, and whispered, "The recipe you gave me is very good. I have been very cautious in the past 3 months, but now I am still very young, so I can't talk about it. Is very shallow, only a little over a month." Manbao supported her and said to Yang Heshu, "Brother Yang, don't worry, I will take good care of Mrs. Yang. You can also help me see my junior brothers and my elder brother Bai." Yang Heshu smiled and said, "Don't worry." He took Bai Dalan and the others and turned around to go to the reception area in the front yard. Manbao heard Bai Shan ask him, "Isn't Tang Xuexian coming?" "He won't come," Yang Heshu chuckled, "I'm afraid he won't be free during this time." Manbao supported Mrs. Yang's hand and followed the maid to the backyard, and asked curiously, "If Master Tang doesn't come, will Mrs. Tang not come?" "She should have arrived early," Mrs. Yang said with a smile. "Her family is related to the Han family, so she should be the first to arrive. The Li family is very lively. After 100 days for the children, it will almost catch up with the old man's birthday." Because this child was cut out, and Zhou Man had already said that Han Wu Niang should not be pregnant again, and they found other doctors to say the same, so this child is equivalent to Li Saburo's only son. Therefore, not only did the Li family dote on this child, but the Han family also valued this child very much. However, Han Wu Niang didn't want to see guests when she was washing the third and the full moon. She had to hide in the room to recuperate, so she didn't do anything. She just ate at home and had fun. Now that the child is 100 days old, Mrs. Han Wu Niang is all healed. Now she can run and dance in good health. Yangzhou. As a result, even the relatives and friends from Yangzhou came to join in the fun. Anyway, everyone has money and leisure, and Yangzhou is not far from the capital, so don't you come whenever you want? So today is especially lively. Man Bao helped Mrs. Yang all the way to the past. They were all laughing rich women and girls, few of whom she knew. But Mrs. Yang knew a lot of people, and there were also many people who knew Mrs. Yang. Don't look outside the door, everyone looked at Madame Yang with envy and jealousy, but when they got to the backyard, they couldn't see Yang Heshu anymore, and everyone was very enthusiastic towards Madame Yang. Mrs. Yang also dealt with them appropriately, and introduced Man Bao by the way. Walking all the way to the deepest part of the backyard, Mrs. Yang saw Mrs. Tang surrounded by Han Wu Niangzi, so she pulled Man Bao over. Han Wu Niang is the protagonist today and was joking with people. Seeing Mrs. Yang coming over, her eyes were still light, but when she saw Man Bao next to her, her eyes lit up and she immediately got up to meet her. Little Niangzhou, you are here, hurry up. Come and sit. She glanced at Man Bao and Mrs. Yang curiously, and asked, Zhou Xiao Niang is familiar with Kui's sister. That's right, Kui's is younger than Han Wu Niangzi, 2 years younger. Don't look at Han Wu Niangzi and Li Sanlang's relationship now, the relationship is good, but she also liked Yang Heshu. The Han family also mentioned marriage with the Yang family, but they just don't agree. It should be said that those in this room who were less than 3 years older than Yang Heshu and less than 6 years younger all had a crush on him, and many people also mentioned marriages with the Yang family. The threshold of the Yang family was really trampled by matchmakers. If the princesses in the palace were not too young, they would have thought of stepping on the threshold of the Yang family. Man Bao nodded with a smile and explained, I'm from Lujiang County. Han Wu Niang suddenly realized. See, she couldn't remember that her attending doctor was from Lujiang County, but she could remember that Yang Heshu was the magistrate of Lujiang County, so she understood everything when she said that she was from Lujiang County. Mrs. Tang also smiled and came forward to say hello. There are many people Man Bao knows in this room, and they have a good impression of Man Bao. Although I haven't seen each other recently, but what about the disputes outside? It's fine when I can't see you, and I'll definitely say hello when I see them. So there is nothing uncomfortable about Man Bao. She also followed Han Wu Niang to see the child. This child was not young when he was born, and he has been raised better now. He is white and plump. Man Bao touched his warm palm, teased him, and then touched his pulse. Wu Niangzi said, the child is very healthy. When Han Wu Niang heard this, she was even more happy, as if she had gotten something good. She hugged the child and smiled like eating honey, and thanked Man Bao again and again. The female relatives who followed over to see the children couldn't help but feel a move in their hearts. Those who had various problems on their bodies could not wait to pull Man Bao to have a look, but after thinking about this situation, they finally held back. However, everyone was really enthusiastic about Man Bao, and many girls thought to themselves, what is the matter of a doctor in the royal family? People are only responsible for curing diseases. What's the matter with these girls? They just want to find a knowledgeable and interesting doctor to see a doctor. Thinking about it this way, everyone became more enthusiastic about Man Bao. Whether they knew each other before or not, they all came up to say hello. So, the girls who were the size of Mingming and Manbao were all playing in the garden, admiring the newly opened peonies, but Manbao was talking in the inner room, which was too lively. After entering the backyard, Keek only rang twice. Anyway, Manbao couldn't dig other people's gardens in public, so she didn't go out at all, and stayed in the room to talk to the ladies. Mainly because she is not familiar with the little girls outside. After a while, Manbao was dragged by Madame Tang and Madame Yang to another room to meet a bunch of old ladies. They also smiled at Manbao, and after turning around, they even received a bunch of greetings. She was a little confused. Madame Tang couldn't help but pinched her face and smiled, and said, "Old madam, they like you, it's a good thing." She leaned into her ear and whispered, "This is to follow the Queen Mother's wishes." Manbao understood. She silently looked at the meeting ceremony full of arms, wondering if the Queen Mother would have a heart attack if she knew. She definitely didn't know that she gave her a gift. She could still receive so much outside, especially the kindness of these old ladies is not so easy to get. See you at 11 o'clock.